In 1912, a Polish book dealer named Wilfrid Voynich was searching through a Jesuit college library near Rome. He was looking for rare manuscripts to buy and resell. Inside a wooden chest, buried under centuries of dust, he found a book that would go on to become one of the most studied and most frustrating objects in human history. It was roughly 240 pages long, handwritten on vellum, that is an animal's skin, illustrated with colorful drawings of plants, astronomical charts, and every single page was covered in writing. But here is the problem. No one could read a single word of it. Now, I want you to actually picture this book. The plants drawn in it look like nothing that grows on Earth. Some have roots that form dragon heads. Others have leaves that curl into impossible patterns. The astronomical diagrams show constellations that no known culture ever recorded, and the text itself flows smoothly across the pages, clearly written by someone comfortable with the script, someone who knew exactly what they were saying. But the script matches no known language, no known cipher, and no known code. It has letters, or what look like letters, arranged into word-like groups, with spacing and repetition patterns that follow the logic of a real language. It is not random noise, it has grammar, it has structure, it has rhythm, it just refuses to be read. Since Voynich found it, some of the brightest code breakers in history have tried to crack it. During World War I, British cryptographers who broke German naval codes took a shot at it and they failed. During World War II, American code breakers who cracked Japanese military communications tried. They failed too. In the decades since, computer scientists, linguists, and artificial intelligence researchers have all taken their turn, and the manuscript still gives up nothing. Carbon dating places the vellum in the early 1400s, somewhere between 1404 and 1438. The ink and pigments are consistent with that period, so the book is genuinely old. It is not a modern forgery. Someone in the 15th century sat down and wrote this, page after page, illustration after illustration, producing a complete, coherent book in a language or code that has never existed anywhere else in the entire archaeological record. Today, the Voynich Manuscript sits in Yale University's Baghdad Rare Book Library, catalog number MS408. You can view it online, and you can scroll through every single page, or you can stare at the strange plants and the unknown script, the unreadable words, and you will be looking at exactly what Voynich saw in that wooden chest in 1912. A book that exists, a language that does not, and the only question that remains, did we lose the key or did we never have it? In 1992, farmers in China's Zhejiang province drained several village ponds, but underneath the water they did not find mud. They found massive underground chambers. These were not natural caves, they were carved by human hands. Today, they are known as the Longyou Caves, a group of around 24 artificial sandstone caverns near Longyou County. Together, they cover roughly 30,000 square meters. For comparison, that's 4 football pitches, and some chambers go nearly 30 meters underground. For comparison, that's 10-story building below the ground. Inside, the walls, ceilings, and pillars are covered with neat parallel chisel marks. The cuts are so consistent that the caves almost look machine-made, but they were carved into solid rock by hand. To create them, workers would have had to remove huge amounts of stone, yet no one knows where that stone went. There are no clear historical records explaining who built the caves, no tools were left behind, no confirmed purpose has been found. Some believe the caves may be more than 2,000 years old, because pottery fragments found in the cave silt have been linked to the period between 206 BC and 23 AD. But even that does not prove exactly when the caves were carved, and that is what makes them so strange. The design looks planned, and the pillars were left in place to hold the ceilings, and the chambers are separate, but built with a similar style. So what were they? A quarry, a storage site, a military hideout, a ceremonial space? No one knows for sure. The Longyou Caves are open to visitors today. But the biggest questions are still unanswered, which is, Who built them and why were they built? And how did a project this huge leave almost no trace in history? In 1929, an old map was found inside Topkapı Palace in Istanbul. It was drawn in 1513 by Piri Reis, an Ottoman admiral and map maker. The surviving piece shows parts of Europe, North Africa, and South America. That is unusual because in 1513, the Americas were still new to European explorers. Yet parts of South America appear with surprising detail for that time. Piri Reis mentioned he used older maps to create his own. Out of that, some came from Portuguese sailors. And that makes sense because Portugal was one of the strongest sea powers of that age. Their sailors traveled far, and its map makers held some of the best ocean knowledge available. He also said one source came from Christopher Columbus. That matters because Columbus's own map is now lost. So this small fragment may preserve information from maps that no longer exist. But the most famous claim is about the bottom of the map. Some writers say it shows Antarctica, long before explorers confirmed it in 1820. Others say it even shows Antarctica before ice covered it, but most historians do not accept that idea. They believe the southern land is more likely Terra Australis, an imagined southern continent often drawn on old maps. So the real mystery is not proof of an ancient super civilization. It probably is not. The real mystery is this: how did Piri Reis collect so much world knowledge in 1513? Which older maps did he use? And what other lost maps disappeared forever? One fragment survived, and it still makes historians wonder what else we lost. Now, if you think the pyramids of Giza or the Stonehenge of the UK are the oldest, then you're wrong. Göbekli Tepe is the oldest temple on Earth. It was built around 9500 BCE. It is 6,000 years older than the pyramid. It is located in southeastern Turkey, about 15 kilometers northeast of the city of Şanlıurfa. To see how amazing this is, look at when they built it. It was the pre-pottery Neolithic age. Think of this as a time of big change. Before this, people did not stay in one place. They moved around to find food. But in this era, humans began to settle down. They built the first villages and started farming. But there is a catch. They had no pottery yet. No clay pots, bowls, or jars to store water or cook food. They lived without metals or writing, yet they still carved huge stone pillars, and they made the oldest large buildings in the world. How did they do this without pottery? That is what makes it so shocking. These people had no cities, no metal tools, and no modern machines, yet they carved huge stone pillars. Some stood over 5 meters tall, some weighed many tons, and many were covered with animals like foxes, snakes, birds, and wild boar. This was not a small camp, it was a major building project, but the strangest part came later. The site was covered over, not just left behind, it was buried. Stone, soil, and rubble were packed around the pillar, then the people walked away. I mean, why would anyone do that? Why spend years building something so huge, only to hide it underground? No one knows for sure. Maybe the site had served its purpose. Maybe their beliefs changed. Maybe they moved on. Who knows? In 1938, a German archaeologist named Wilhelm König was working in a museum in Baghdad. He was sorting old objects in a storage room. Most of them were ordinary. Then he found something strange. It was a small clay jar, and it was only about 14 centimeters tall. On top, it has a dark asphalt stopper which closed the top, and inside the jar was a copper tube, and in the middle of that tube was an iron rod. The copper tube and the iron rod seemed to sit in an acidic liquid. König saw the pattern at once, and it looked like a battery. Now look at how it was made. The outer shell was a clay jar about 75 millimeters wide. Inside, it was a copper cylinder, and a copper cap sealed the bottom. Through the center ran an iron rod, and if you put an acidic liquid between those two metals, then the reaction begins and one metal becomes positive and the other becomes negative. That is how a simple battery works, and this jar had the same basic idea. Experts think the liquid may have been grape juice, vinegar, or wine. All three are acidic enough to cause a reaction between copper and iron. Experts dated the jar to somewhere between 250 BC and 640 AD. Think about what that means. The date range is very wide, and experts are not saying it was made in one specific year. They are saying it could belong to any point across almost 900 years of history. To understand how wide that is, this timeline begins before the Roman Empire reached its height, passes through the time of Julius Caesar and the fall of the Western Roman Empire, and continues into the early medieval period. So the date gives us a possible historical window, but it does not give us a final answer. Alessandro Volta created the battery we use today in 1800, and scientists only began to grasp electricity in the 1700s. To understand how strange this claim is, remember this. Alessandro Volta created the first true battery in 1800. That was around the time Napoleon was rising to power in Europe, and the Industrial Revolution was beginning to reshape the world, and America had only recently become a new nation. And even before that, in the 1700s, scientists were still trying to understand what electricity actually was. So if this jar really worked as a battery, then someone in ancient Mesopotamia may have known this idea more than 1,000 years earlier, and the design does seem to work. This is where the story gets even more interesting. In 2020, YouTube creator Praveen Mohan built a copy of the Baghdad Battery. He followed the same old design and tested it himself. Watch.
Now, these jars were about 5 inches tall, and they had a very unique setup. The jars contained a copper cylinder, actually a copper foil rolled up to form a cylinder. And in the center of the copper cylinder, there was an iron rod put inside. They had used a bitumen to make a stopper to make sure that the iron did not touch the copper. The next step is to pour grape juice. So here I've made some grape juice, and I'm gonna pour this inside. And then we're going to put the whole thing back into the jar. Now, the copper will act as a positive terminal, and the iron will act as a negative terminal, and the grape juice will be the electrolyte. Now, believe it or not, once you add the grape juice, you can actually hear the chemical reaction. But we're not here to just hear the chemical reaction. We want to see how much power is produced from this battery. So let's hook this up to a voltmeter and see how much electricity is produced. So if we hook up the voltmeter to the Baghdad battery, now I can see that this is producing more than 0.5 volts. So it produces half a volt, and it is a battery beyond any doubt.
One jar produced about half a volt of electricity, and that may not sound like much, but he did not stop there. He joined 12 Baghdad batteries together, and this time they lit a small red bulb. Also, they powered a buzzer and it beeped. 12 clay jars produced more than 6 volts of electricity from a design that may be over 2,000 years old. Watch again.
Okay, so you can see that I've put like a dozen Baghdad batteries together. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pour grape juice in all of them. When I connect them, I can clearly see a voltage. I can clearly see that it exceeds beyond 6 volts. Now what I want to do is I want to see if I can light up this light bulb. So if I hook up this light bulb, you can see that this light bulb is actually glowing. Now, let's turn off the lights and see if it's any good. So here you can see how the bulb was capable of producing enough light. And here's a buzzer, and let's see if this buzzer will work with these batteries. As you can see, the buzzer also works.
And now we reach the biggest mystery. If ancient Mesopotamians had a working battery, what did they use it for? Did they use it to coat metal with another metal? Or did they use it for healing? Or did they use it in rituals? We still don't know. We may have their power source, and modern tests suggest it works, but we have found no wires, no circuits, and no clear device connected to it. So the Baghdad Battery is not just a mystery about ancient technology, it is also a mystery about lost knowledge, and it points to a part of human history that may have existed and then disappeared almost without a trace. So here's where we end up. The Baghdad Battery, a temple buried on purpose in Turkey, caves carved by someone we can't identify, a map that showed Antarctica before it was discovered, and a book no one has read for 600 years. 5 mysteries, 5 discoveries that don't fit, and not a single answer that actually closes the case. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.